Good morning, students. So far, we have discussed the poem Happiness and the speech Two Sides of Life, and we have also discussed the grammatical concept that is parts of speech. Now, let's look at another poem that is A Red Red Rose, written by Robert Burns. This poem, uh, tells us the intensity of emotions, and this poem also show the how emotions eclipse the sense of logic, and it also this poem also demonstrates the beauty of similes and imagery and melody, etc. The major objectives of this poem to know the intensity of emotions, and to know how emotions create the sense of logic, and how this poem also demonstrates the importance and significance of imagery and similes and melody, etc. And this poem actually was written by Robert Burns. Robert Burns is a very famous Scottish poet. And this poem is to show love of the poet towards his love. So Robert Burns, who was born in 1759 and died in 1796, the ploughman poet, one of the leading voices of the Scotland in English literature. Robert Burns is a very famous Scotland English poet. He wrote any number of poems. He wrote any number of ballads, poems, lyrics, and etc. He is best known as the pioneer of the Romantic movement for his lyrical poetry and rewriting of Scottish folk songs. Of course, he was one of the pioneers of Romantic period, especially the Romantic period began in 1798 with William Wordsworth's poetry and S.T. Coleridge's poetry. This man was the contemporary of William Wordsworth, and he was considered one of the pioneers of Romantic literature. And the Romantic literature majorly focuses on the portrayal of nature in the poetry, and his volume of work, particularly the Scottish, earned him the status of the national bard of in Scotland. This man, being a Scotland poet, and he was called as the national bard of Scotland for his literary works, and his interest in reviving the culture of his land. His interest majorly to revive the culture of Scotland, and to rewrite the Scottish folk songs, and to portray the Scottish culture in his poetry. And he mainly focuses on the uh, subjective themes of poetry that makes him a passionate poet. And Robert Burns, one of the famous Scottish literary scholars, who produced any number of poems. His major works, especially ballads. A ballad is nothing but a folk song, a ballad, and especially the writer of the ballad is unknown. It comes from the ancestors, and ballad is generally accompanied by a musical instrument, and ballad you can find rhythms also, right? And Robert Burns, being a ploughman poet and being the pioneer of Romantic literature in English literature, and his contribution in English literature during Romantic period must be appreciated. Now, coming to the poem Red Red Rose is a ballad written by Robert Burns. And Red Red Rose is one of the best lyrics in English literature. And a lyric is a song, ballad, a lyric is a song that expresses the personal point of view and sung to the lyre, a stringed musical instrument. Poetry can be in many forms. Poetry can be written in the form of lyric. Lyric in generally the poetry must be accompanied by a musical instrument lyre, and a ballad is nothing but an ancestral folk songs, and we have elegy, another form of literature, another form of poetry. This kind of poems are generally written on the death of people, on the death of the particular person. Elegy, we have another kinds of poems. Again, when it comes to meters, we have stanzas and quarters, and blank verse in the sense a poem that does not have a rhyming scheme, and a poem that has rhyming scheme. For example, we have another poem called sonnet. Sonnet generally we have the rhyming scheme in sonnet, and the sonnet is a 14 lines of poem. And Shakespeare, he wrote 154 sonnets in his life, and all these sonnets generally the subjective theme of sonnet is to express love. So here Robert Burns, he wrote this poem in the form of lyric. So a Red Rose is a lyric written by Robert Burns, and one of the fantastic lyrics in English literature. And a lyric is nothing but a song that is accompanied by a musical instrument lyre, and the lyric consists of 16 lines. The lyric is consists of 16 lines, whereas sonnet consists of 14 lines divided into, and a lyric generally is written in 16 lines and divided into 4 stanzas. 4 plus 4. So 4 stanzas. The poem, the poem blends the eternity of love with morality of life. The poem expresses the eternity of love with morality of life. It's an address to the speaker's love, to whom he swears eternal love and allegiance. So here you find the writer expresses his eternal love to his beloved, and he swears to express his eternal love, and the speaker expresses his intense feeling and his intense emotion in the form of a poem that consists of similes, imagery, melody, and he also expresses his love in the form of lyric. So this is how you find. So we'll go to the poem in the next video. This is only the pre-reading of a poem. Thank you.